Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week's video, I'm going to try and talk about an artist who has influenced me, try and explain how that artist has influenced me, and just sort of share some of those ideas. They may be useful or helpful to other people. Now on screen you can see two self-portraits by Vincent van Gogh. Vincent is not the artist that we're going to talk about, but he is a good way of introducing this artist because the artist we are going to talk about influenced Vincent's art. Vincent was a huge fan of this artist as well. And I think you can see the influence on screen in these two self-portraits. The one on the left from 1886 or thereabouts, and the one on the right from about a year later. And we can see, I think, very clearly the huge difference in the style of painting. And the question might be, what happened? What influenced Vincent so much that his style changed so completely in that sort of 12-month period? And the style on the right, of course, is the style that we now associate most with Vincent van Gogh. It's the style that he stuck with pretty much for the rest of his short life, his art career. The one on the left is a style that he he abandoned. He stopped doing that sort of style of painting. So I say, what happened? Well, we know in this time period he was in Paris. We know from his letters, the many letters that he wrote to his brother Theo, that he was exposed to Impressionist art. He liked at least some of the Impressionist art that he saw. He liked the brighter colours and things. And that certainly had some influence on him. But I think there was something else even more influential for Vincent. And that's the artist that we're going to talk about today. So this artist was not European. His style of art was not European. He was Japanese. His name was Hiroshige. And you can see a picture of him on the left. I say his name was Hiroshige. It wasn't really. I forget what his actual family name was. But from an early age, he started signing all of his artwork as Hiroshige. So that's what he's remembered as these days. On the right, you can see a couple of his landscapes. Most of his art was either landscapes or portraits. He did a lot of portraits of famous actors and sumo wrestlers and things like that. People who would have been famous in Tokyo in that time period. So what have I learned from Hiroshige? There's a couple of things at least. So the first one is simplifying the landscape. And if you look at the two example landscapes, I think you'd see that it has been simplified. It's obviously not naturalistic painting. The goal here is not to completely 100% accurately represent reality. It's not that sort of naturalistic painting. It's illustrating reality. It's creating a more aesthetic illustration of reality, if you like. And it's simplifying things. It's abstract in that sense. So there's fewer details. Everything's a bit simplified. The snowy scene top right, the snow has been reduced down to sort of white dots in the sky, but we get the idea, and we can see the snow and the people trudging through the snow. And we can even imagine, those of us who live in countries that get at least some snow, we know what that feels like, slipping and sliding and trudging away through the snow, trying to get home. It's something that we can identify with in this painting, I think. And he does it very well. So that's the first thing, is simplifying things. You don't have to, beautiful art doesn't need to be complicated. It can be quite simple. There's a beauty in simplicity itself, I think. Underneath that, we have another landscape. This landscape is a place called Hakone. It's southwest-ish of Tokyo. I've been there a few times. The only things I remember about Hakone are lots of mountains. It's heading towards Mount Fuji. black eggs. So, as well as being quite mountainous, it's also a volcanic area. Mount Fuji itself is an active volcano. It's not very active, but it is active. And the area around it does have some volcanic activity. There's lots of sort of hot springs and pools of hot mud and things. And they make eggs, black eggs. Basically, they boil the eggs in the hot sulfurous water, which turns the eggshell black. Once you crack open the eggshell, it's just a hard-boiled egg. There's nothing strange about it. Anyway, we're getting distracted. The other thing I want to say about his Hakone painting was, again, it's simplified into these flat shapes. And the use of color, very interesting use of color. It's not an entirely representational use of color. Yes, the lake is blue, the grass is green, but there's also like yellow rocks and blue rocks. And what I'm trying to say is, when you're using color, it doesn't have to be just representational. You can use other colors if you want. Again, if we're getting away from this naturalistic way of making art, where everything has to look the way it does in the real world, and if we say, okay, we've stepped away from that, now we can use color in whatever way we as artists want to use the color. And that, if you can do that, that's a very liberating way of thinking. It opens up all sorts of creative possibilities for you. One other thing that I learned from Hiroshige was the use of black outlines. And you see this in some of the so-called post-impressionist art. People like Vincent van Gogh used it, and Gauguin used it, and some others. And you can see it in Hiroshige's image, for example, in the mountains in the distance. He's done those in sort of blue color, and he has a black outline on them. Also in the foreground, you can see the rocks have this sort of black outline. It's the way sort of cartoonists would work almost. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. Again, it's this simplifying things and making things, creating a bold outline, that sort of black outline. I like it. I like that style, that sort of aesthetic. And for me, it works. So those are sort of three things that I've picked up from looking at Hiroshige's artwork. Simplifying things, using color in a creative and artistic way, not just a naturalistic way, and using these dark outlines as well to define shapes, which again adds to the aesthetic quality of the image and the beauty of the image. So to sort of finish off, as I said, Vincent was a big fan of Hiroshige, and he did do some copies of Hiroshige's artwork. Vincent, of course, was using oil paint, which is quite different from the sort of ink and brush that Hiroshige would have used, and certainly very different from the ink block printing style, which, as I say, I have a link in the description box below if you want to check that out. It is a complicated process of turning the original artwork into a woodblock print, at least back in those days with the technology they had back then. So in the sort of spirit of the way Vincent copied Hiroshige, I also tried, but I was using digital art rather than oil paint or brush and ink or anything like that, just because digital art is convenient for me. So the one on the right is my version. I didn't try to copy in the way that Vincent did. I copied part of it, but I also simplified it and made it a bit more abstract and changed the colors and things and simplified the color scheme. It's another thing that I like to do, is simplify things. This is not something I've necessarily learnt just from Hiroshige's work, but certainly simplifying color schemes, not using any sort of gradations of color, just flat colors, and using a more limited palette as well. So it's basically black, blue, white and yellow in mine. Okay, so hopefully, as I say, that was of some interest or use to people. I definitely think we can learn from artists from the past and from different sort of cultures and things. It doesn't always have to be the same thing. And this is not something new. As I say, it was something that influenced Vincent van Gogh's artwork, and he did pretty well from it. So don't be afraid to be influenced by other artists and to learn from them as well. You don't necessarily just have to copy them. You can take what you like and incorporate it into your own style of doing artwork. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you again in next week's video.